Community Matters.
Hello and welcome to Many Voices, One Community, stories that unite us across Long Island and beyond. I'm Gaitley Stevenson-Mathews. I'm pleased to serve as Community Engagement Officer at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. And of course, that's where this podcast originates from. And I am especially pleased today, not only to be the host of this podcast, but to have my dear friend Sheryl Goodine with me today. Sheryl, what a journey you have had. What a journey and what a legacy. We're going to talk about legacy today because of your dad and because of his involvement in the community. I have been trying to get you on this program for some time because I have spoken to every friend you have, not quite everyone, but most of them. And so if you didn't hear about the fact that I'm bringing you on, so here you go. So Sheryl, why don't we start? I'd like to talk a little bit about certainly want to get to your involvement with the Martin Luther King celebration that we do in Glen Cove that you began. Is that correct?
I did not begin it, no. I was introduced to it through my dad and volunteered to be a part of it early on.
And how old? So why don't we start there? And then I do want to back up and talk a little bit about you and your dad and that relationship. So what is the official name of that march? I know it's a big, long word, big, long name.
Yes. Since we are we work in cooperation with the city of Glen Cove and the city school district, one of the mayors, I forgot which one, named the committee. It was a committee, now it is a commission. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Birthday Commemorative Commission. We just call it the Dr. King Commission. The
Dr. King Commission,
yes.
Right. No, and I understand that. I always have got, we've got several friends who are with Northwell, and I always feel like Northwell, all the titles at Northwell are like 3 million miles long. But the Martin Luther King Commission, and as you know, I grew up in North Carolina, and I grew up in a region of the country that 45% of our population were African American or Black, I think is what is more commonly used now. But one of the things I love about Glen Cove is that we really do have more diversity here than some of our neighboring communities.
Yes. And
that is, I feel like, not only a gift to our community, but a strength to our community. And the fact that march, which began with your dad, so your dad was a part of that from the very beginning, is that correct?
Yes.
So why don't you share a little bit about your dad, about that commission and that march, and how that has informed you in your forward march.
Well, the march began, the celebration began directly after Dr. King's assassination. The city of Glen Cove officials, as well as clergy from all over Glen Cove and the surrounding areas, and community activists, community members got together, and they had a march. Now, I believe at that time it was from the middle school to the St. Patrick's Parish Hall. And it seemed as though the entire community came out. It was a beautiful sight to see. And at that time, I was in high school, and I was serving as the secretary to the youth branch of the Glen Cove branch of the NAACP. So I was selected to read a speech from the youth of Glen Cove. And it was very, very overwhelming. But that is how the march began. It was decided by my dad and several others that this should be a celebration to commemorate Dr. King's life and his legacy that would become an annual affair. So it began with having programs at the different houses of worship in the city of Glen Cove, and it would rotate from the Catholic Church to the synagogue to First Baptist, so on and so forth, over the years. And then at some point, the audience became so large that the Glen Cove School District offered us the use of the Glen Cove Robert Finley Middle School. And that's when the celebrations began there. And it has turned into an annual program. Of course, it is held on Dr. King's birthday.
And of course, the thing, I think I've gone to all of them since I've lived in Glen Cove, which would be from 2005 forward, or 2007 rather forward. It really is beautiful to see the entire community turn out. Oftentimes it's a little cold, but we bundle up, and the number of times walking to have the opportunity and the privilege to walk shoulder to shoulder with you as we walk up the street singing civil rights songs.
Yes.
Many of the same songs that Martin Luther King sang. Certainly many of the songs, I'm guessing your father, was he a singer?
Oh, yes, he was.
Okay, then I'm guessing many of the same songs that your father sang. And so important to remember. And the fact, as I understand, that commemoration, that march, that celebration of that great, great man, it's the longest continuous running celebration of that kind on Long Island, is it not?
Yes. And again, what you're referring to is the symbolic march that we have right before we begin our program. And the march is from the First Baptist Church in Glen Cove to the middle school. And yes, it's usually cold. But I always try to recognize the Glen Cove Police Department, the Glen Cove Fire Department, because they march with us, usually in front of us, and are not attacking us, are not allowing others to attack us, as unfortunately Dr. King and his followers had to go through. So we do enjoy that march, even if it's cold. My dad was of the opinion, whatever the weather, we would march.
Yeah, I agree.
I kind of take that down a notch. If it's below freezing, we have a motorcade. But that march just hopefully gives people an idea, a very small idea of the sacrifices that were made by those who did march with Dr. King, black, white, Protestant, Jew, whatever. And such sacrifices they made before, during, and especially after marches.
Right. And do you, I may be telling your age a little bit, but how old were you when Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated? Do you remember?
I was still in high school. And I remember someone had run down the hall and said, Dr. King's dead. They killed Dr. King. They killed Dr. King. And it seemed like everyone in the hallway just froze. First, out of concern and, oh my goodness, we couldn't believe that was true. And then secondly, who killed him and are we next? So that was a terrible feeling of sadness, but also fear at that time.
Next?
If someone could assassinate a great man, such an important man, such a man of peace as Dr. King, then who were we that we might not be a target? And it was very frightening.
How was it? Again, I know a little bit about your dad. Some of the things I've read, I know. I'm informed somewhat about your dad because I know you. As the saying goes, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, is the expression, I believe. I have always seen you. I don't even know, Sheryl, I don't remember when we met. I have no idea. I feel like I've known you forever. But I have, when any situation, when there is need in the community and when it is time to speak out and time to take a stand, certainly I have come to know that you are someone that people look to and someone who has always been part of the equation, not the problem. How did the little girl, I'm going to be 65 my next birthday, which feels really old to me. And I had a buddy say, would you have ever thought we'd be this old? But if you don't mind, take your mind back to that little girl at that period of your life and your dad and seeing your dad, and share a little bit about your dad's involvement. I know he marched with Martin Luther King, as I understand. Yes. Share a little bit about that and how that impacted you at such a young age.
Well, it impacted me directly and indirectly. By indirectly, I mean as a young child, I attended South Elementary School, which is a school that I think now is the Tiegerman School.
Yes, I had just had Dr. Tiegerman in here, right.
But at that time, it was segregated. I could count with 2 fingers, maybe, the numbers of white students that were there. We had all white teachers, though. We didn't have any black teachers. All white teachers, primarily black. That was our, neighborhood school. And I didn't find out until years and years and years later that my dad had used me as the plaintiff in a case brought against the Board of Education of the city of Glen Cove to desegregate the schools. As far as I knew, I was going to South school that all of my uncles and aunts had gone to. One thing kind of stood out. I had a friend, her name was Patty. She moved into Glen Cove up the hill on Robinson Avenue, and we became friends. Now, this was maybe 3rd grade. And one day, Patty invited me to her house. First time I had ever been in a home up there. And
on the hill, literally on the hill.
Not the hill.
Not the hill, but on a hill, yes.
And I was so amazed because she had a window with a window seat, and we sat and we talked and we played dolls. And her mom came in and brought milk and crumb cake. I had never had crumb cake in my life. So this was wonderful. This was great. And then the next day, Patty didn't come to school. And the day after that, Patty didn't come to school. And of course, eventually I asked the teacher, well, where's Patty? Patty had moved. Her parents had decided they didn't want her to go to a school
that was predominantly black.
With black kids.
Right.
But we were friends.
Right.
So that stuck out in my mind. So when I found out years later what Dad had done, I was like, oh my goodness, why me? But again, why not me?
Why not?
And as a result, the schools in Glen Cove were desegregated. Busing began so that kids who lived on the hill where I used to live in the projects, they were bused to different elementary schools. We all met up at the middle school and the high school, of course. But the busing began. The bad thing was the busing only went to a certain mileage. So as it turned out, students on the hill were not allowed free busing. You could pay for it, but whose parents had enough money to pay for busing? So, and that went on for years and years and
so
years.
So it's systematically 100%. It's segregated. Systematically 100%. It's segregated. It's from perspective for me from a white guy who grew up in the, I'm going to do quotes, segregated South. And certainly it was the segregated South. And, what a horrible history as it relates to race relations and to the black population.
It was history. It did occur.
Absolutely.
And no one should be trying to erase it because it is American history.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think important. But the other realization for me is to hear stories of this, which we may have had the segregated South. We also had the segregated North.
Amen. Still do.
Yeah. No. And I just, that the whole people were, I find, are eager to point to the South or point to someone else to see the problems, or to see, where there were grave wrongs. But it's hard to look at yourself, and it's hard to look at your own community.
That's right.
And, I just think about, even if you look at slavery and the civil rights movement, that was a few hundred years ago. Grand scheme of things, that's not a long time ago. It's not a long time ago that we thought it was okay. It's somehow, in my head, I can't even wrap my head around it. And yet, I grew up in the South, so I'm certainly, sadly, came from a legacy that somehow thoughts, and in my head, I think, oh my God, I pray to God that had I been in the world at that point, that I had been part of the solution, that I was part of an underground railroad, or at least I spoke out. And to me, that's the lesson. That's a big lesson, because, you look at our Holocaust. Mm-hmm. The Hitler was elected to office and persuaded an entire an entire country. And, obviously there were people who were full out on board, way it's got to be. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of people who, if you made waves, your family your job went away. So there were certainly a big push to make sure you went along with things. And thankfully, there were then the upstanders.
Right.
And to me, there's such... I know that there's a march that often happens with Calvary's involved, First Baptist involved. We have 5 historically black churches in Glen Cove. Some people think we have 2, or some people think we have 3, but we have 5 historically black churches in Glen Cove. Are there? 4. You are right. We have 4. Maybe I don't know where I got the 5th one. You are right. We have 4. But some people, don't even know that is the case. But I think about. I see the Jewish community and the African American community often come together. Mm-hmm. And the number of times that I see that march, and I see our rabbis and our cantors. I think about Cantor Gustavo, and I think about our rabbis. And I do think, the journeys are certainly different, and it's certainly a different time, but there are certainly parallels. And I think there certainly
are parallels, actually, with just about every ethnic group. We all have our stories to tell, and those stories should unite us rather than divide us. But my dad was one who could, we always say you can't see the trees for the forest. My dad saw the trees. He saw the injustices beginning from when he volunteered during I believe it was the Korean War, and on his way with other black and white soldiers to training in the South. They boarded a train, and they were all cajoling and ribbing each other about who was not going to do well in basic training and so on and so forth. And he said as they neared Washington, D.C., the sergeant came, and he said, okay, you guys stay here. The rest of you come with me. And of course, these were young men, and they asked, why? Where are we going? And the sergeant said, we're getting ready to pass the Mason-Dixon line. You have to go to the back of the train. And in a way that crushed my dad, and it made him realize that somebody somewhere thought he was different and not good. He was good enough to serve the country, but not good enough to be considered an equal with a white person.
Right.
So after he came back to Glen Cove, married, started a family, he began to see the injustices here in our own city. He joined the NAACP, eventually became president of the Glen Cove branch. And as a president, he began to hone in on those systematic institutions that were really promoting discrimination, segregation. He was responsible for desegregating the fire department.
Beautiful.
He helped with further integration of the police department. He fought for fair housing in the city of Glen Cove, and anyone, regardless of their color, regardless of their religion, their ethnicity, who felt that they had been discriminated against, for example, applied for a job but didn't get it because of their race, went to rent an apartment or buy a home and were discriminated against because of their race. Anyone with any kind of an issue like that would seek out Mr. Davis. And Mr. Davis, at great sacrifice to himself, to his family, he didn't care. He would help anyone, and he did help folks. Anywhere from someone who was arrested unjustly, someone who may have, again, been denied housing, education, anything. Dad was right there fighting for them.
You, Sheryl, you must be so very proud of that. I can't think of anything that
proud,
is more
but
beautiful than knowing that your dad was someone who there was at least one light that they felt they could go to.
And there were others. He had others that surrounded him and supported him. Mr. William Johnson, who was a Tuskegee Airman. We had another William Johnson, Deacon Johnson, Lucy, and Jeffrey Jackson. Jeffrey became a member of the Glen Cove Fire Department, as did my husband. And Jeffrey had 50 plus years in the fire department before he passed away.
Right.
So Dad opened the doors for many folks to follow through. And again, just like Dr. King, just like other followers, it came at great sacrifice, but he was willing to make the sacrifice for the good of all. And that's, I believe, his legacy.
Right, right. Well, certainly you live out that legacy in the work that you do, that I see at First Baptist Church, that I see in the broader community. I'm an associate member at Calvary AME Church, but I feel right at home when I walk into your church. Often get a chance to sing with your choir,
Yes.
And just the impact of that church and the community makes. So beautiful to see you as a part of that. And again, carrying on the legacy that those who fought so hard.
Well, Dad believed God first.
Right.
Just like Dr. King, he was a man of God first.
Right.
Everything that we do that has to do with the Dr. King program, it always begins with prayer.
Yeah.
And just like Dr. King, and I am proud to be trying to do what I can. As Dad would say, if I can help somebody as I travel along this way, then my living will not be in vain.
Right.
And that's what I believe.
And I am with you in that. I'll say I heard a sermon years ago, and the sermon was, "There are no stepchildren to the kingdom." And, to think that anyone is less than someone else is, to me, a condemnation of humanity. Really. It's to say, so creation goofed? Are you trying to tell me that, creation, however you see God, or whether you see it as God, or are you saying that there is a whole segment which nothing could be further from the truth?
Amen.
And I just think
Amen.
certainly the Jewish community in a broad way with the Holocaust look that squarely in the face every day, and certainly with anti-Semitism rising, with racism rising, with people feeling empowered, that suddenly it's, I feel like in some ways the pendulum has changed as far as people
but we
feel
can bring
empowered.
It back.
We can bring it back. I wanted to kind of fast forward and again thinking about legacy and thinking about the journey and Juneteenth, the celebration. I lived in Dallas, Texas for some years. And of course, we have been celebrating Juneteenth at my church in Dallas that I attended and in the community because historically that is where I believe is 1865 that troops arrived and said, "You're free." So the Emancipation Proclamation had happened 2 years earlier, I believe, is the
longer than that.
Longer than that. Yeah. But what at my home we do a changing of the flags where I've got a flag that we do and had Pandora Hersey and Pastor Hersey at our home for the first one that we did. I think maybe 5 years ago before it was a federal holiday. But I know First Baptist now always does a celebration. And it's been an education for all of us because not everybody heard of Juneteenth. I mean, I think it was...
Well, it was a revelation for many in our church. Juneteenth, what in the world is Juneteenth? And then we all felt guilty because it is a part of our history that we never knew. But we were never taught, we were never made aware of it. But once we were, it was like, okay, this is it.
Right. Well, and let's face it, how we learned history and the books that were printed who taught us history taught us the history that the people in power wanted us to learn, right? So it's no surprise, right? Sheryl, can you believe our time is up?
Yes.
It has been 25 minutes. We could be here for I don't know, at least 3 more episodes. I cannot thank you enough for being on this episode of Many Voices, One Community. You certainly bring an important voice to our community, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. God bless.
This has been Many Voices, One Community. I'm Gaitley Stevenson-Mathews. My guest today was Sheryl Goodine, who is a mover and shaker in our community and making such a difference. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you go to hmtcli.org/hmTV, which takes you to hmTV, Humanity Matters. There are so many other compelling, wonderful podcasts that are happening there. So look for this podcast, look for the other podcasts, and thank you so much for joining us.